This episode is brought to you by Resy and American Express. Resy is a digital platform that connects restaurants to restaurant lovers by elevating dining experiences, providing original industry content, and helping to fill some of the country's most exciting dining rooms. Because restaurants have always been more than just places to eat. The amazing world of restaurants is just a few taps away in the Resy app and at resy.com.
If you thought goldenly breaded McDonald's chicken couldn't get more golden, think Golder! Because new sweet and smoky special edition gold sauce is here! Made for your chicken favorites.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
The one thing that this sort of moment in books is really making clear is that we're not in the Alison Roman having people over moment anymore. This is themed. This is activities. Yeah. There's a recipe in the Brie Larson and Courtney McBroom book for dueling roast chickens, right? For a party.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Bettina Makalintal is a senior reporter at Eater and helps lead the publication's Cookbooks coverage. Today, they released a list of their favorites from the busy fall season, and we talk about it all, as well as some trends she is seeing in book publishing. I always look forward to Eater's robust and well-considered list of books each season, and this one is no different. Bettina fills us in on all of the fall cookbooks we should be picking up this season, and I really hope you enjoy our talk. And at the top of the show, it's the return of Three Things, where Eliza and I talk about what is exciting us in the world of restaurants, cookbooks, and the food world as a whole. Eliza, we are back with Three Things. How are you?
I'm good. I'm ready to talk about three things.
Let's do it. You start.
Okay, well, I'm just really excited to share that I had what I would say is the best restaurant meal in New York in recent memory, which is that I finally went to Aval.
Oh, right.
Have you been?
I haven't been yet. Tell me about it.
It was just everything I had was so good. This is a Persian restaurant here in Brooklyn, in Bushwick, that was opened by one of the original chefs at Sofra, which is a great Persian restaurant also in Brooklyn. I will call out some things I had on the menu, but I don't think there were any misses. Everything was so delicious. We started with Barbary bread with nigella seed and sesame, and we got a couple of things to dip the bread into. I think the best was this thick ring of whipped feta that had fig jam and basil oil. It was just
that sounds great.
Incredible texture, perfect consistency. We had lamb ribs with a tamarind date sauce and walnuts and barberries. They do kind of smaller sized tadig that's super great. Truly, everything was a hit. I really love Persian food, Iranian food, and there isn't that much of it in New York compared to LA where I grew up. So I think that every time there's a new entrant in that, it's exciting. But I think especially just everything we had was so delicious, and I have a lot of friends who go to Aval, and every time someone has gone, I've just heard the best thing. So it seems to be very consistent.
I mean, it sounds like you just could order the bread course and the dips.
You could, but then you would miss out on these beautiful
mini tadig
lamb ribs and the mini tadig and the kafta kebab, and truly just hit after hit. It's exactly what I want to be eating.
I love that rec. I haven't made it there, but it's been circled on my growing list of restaurants to visit in New York. Well, my three things, and I'll start with the first one now, are all from the Hudson Valley. I have been hanging out in my neighborhood, or I guess around where I live, and I have some really great things to share. I want to bring it up now because we're in early September, and I think a lot of listeners are thinking about that fall trip to the Hudson Valley, renting an Airbnb, going to a hotel, staying with friends, and we all need stuff to do. You can't just hang out at home and watch Netflix. I mean, you can if you want. That's not a bad weekend. But I have some recommendations here. The first is I made a visit to the Hudson Valley Apple Project, which to me, it speaks to me because I love apples, as you know. And
you
also,
really do love apples.
I really love apples. West Michigan has great apples. Upstate New York has great apples. They just speak to me. But this is a really cool thing. It is a small plot. You could call it an orchard, but it's kind of a more of an oversized garden in a way. And And the founder, Gidon Call, has grown 160 varieties of apples on this plot of land that you can walk in a few short minutes. He's giving tours all fall, and I think he does them on Saturday and Sundays. It's located between Ankara and West Kopaki, and I think he's at the West Kopaki Farmers Market on Friday selling these apples. And let me tell you, these apples are amazing. I got to try so many different varieties, some russets with pink flesh, and there was some purple flesh. There was like a black flesh apple. There were sugar sweet crab apples that they kind of transcended any crab apple I've ever had. There were apples that tasted like pears. Some of the varieties we tried were Black Oxford, Devil's Russet, and Pit Maston pineapple. And you can guess it tasted like pineapple, like legit. If you love apples, hit them up for a tour or go to the farm stand on Fridays or the farmer's market and visit with Gidon. I love it. It's the Hudson Valley Apple Project.
That's a very autumnal rack. I love that.
So great. What's your next pick?
My next thing is I got to go to Library 180, which is this new image reference library at 180 Maiden Lane here in New York. Yeah. It is so cool, especially if you love magazines, which is my first and biggest love. I would say it's mostly like a fashion magazine archive. The people who are behind it is this woman, Nikki Eagle, and then Stephen Chaikin. They met at V Magazine way back when. Nikki is this incredible archivist, and it's basically her private collection. It's thousands of magazines. I truly cannot fathom how she had them in her apartment before. But now it's this beautiful, nonprofit, free, open by appointment image library. And you can basically email them and then hope that you get a spot. They've had a lot of press coverage recently, so I've heard that the list is getting longer. But I think it's totally worth it when you can get in. Every appointment is for an hour, and you can just kind of page through everything. You can scan references. I was looking at a lot of fashion stuff, but I did see a couple like food things that I thought were
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
I got to look at the ID October 1998 food issue, which is, I think, one of the only food issues that ID has done. And it was really interesting to read about like the trends that they were forecasting for the future. They had a whole photo series about interestingly shaped foods. So, for example, Fruity Pebbles cereal was in there, but also candy cigarettes or just kind of like other interestingly shaped foods. I was looking at a 1982 issue of Interview magazine and looking at all the ads for what restaurants were advertising at that point in time. There was a great, like, iconic Balthazar ad, which was just, I think, 2 years after Balthazar opened. And I also saw a copy of Wet, which was this magazine for, quote, gourmet bathing that I think you often see scans of online, but it's hard to see in person. This is not really a food publication, but there was a lot of kind of food and diet references throughout it. But I think really just the whole experience of getting to sit down in this print archive was just really fun.
So cool they went there. I've read about it, but I haven't made it. That's cool. Like, I feel like looking through old editorial is fascinating to see some of this art direction pre-computers, pre-Mac.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? I think both like the content of the magazine and then also the advertisements within it, even on the computer's front. There are a lot of magazines in the 80s, 90s that have, you know, super out-of-date tech for us now. But the way that it was being kind of talked about, I think to look at it in the present day is really interesting. Also just this, you know, golden age of magazines having all of this money to be putting into their editorials or how it was being printed. I even found a magazine that was a design magazine that the cover was a photo of like a cat on a bed surrounded by litter boxes, and all of the litter boxes had like glitter material kind of, I don't know how they printed this or if it was put in after, but they were basically like glitter kitty litter boxes.
So the actual print had...
The cover had glitter like paper on it in the litter boxes.
Those effects are so cool in magazines. Those are so expensive.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I took a lot of photos. It was really fun.
Wow. I'm reading the Condé Nast history book right now.
Oh, yeah. You should go to the archive after you finish the book. You can look at things with a fresh eye.
Yeah, I'm thinking about when magazines had money.
Yeah.
That made me think about that. That was a crazy era.
Absolutely.
My next Hudson Valley thing is Zinnia's Dinette. It is really cool. It is a restaurant from chef owner Amy Lawton. It's in Craryville, which is about 20 minutes west of Great Barrington, south of Hudson, like 30 miles. I was unaware of this place, which is like, I'm kind of bummed that I didn't know about it sooner because it's really special. It's kind of set up like a New England fish shack, and there's like really nice, like I had some clam bellies that were like really beautifully fried. I had a sardine sandwich on very soft bread. They also have an ice cream shop on the side that does 3 types of sundaes and great soft serve. But the craziest part about this restaurant, and it's really just on the side of the road, kind of understated, is that, and I talked to Amy briefly, they are selling the country's largest selection of tinned fish in the restaurant. There are over 500 tinned fish being sold there. So products from Spain and Portugal. There was some newer American brands there. All the incredible design just in front of you. You can buy any of the tins there and have them plate it for you with vegetables and pickles. And that was a wonderful touch. And it's just this jewel. It's called Zinnia's Dinette. You got it. It's like totally your stuff.
I can't wait to go. It sounds perfect.
What's your last thing?
The last thing I want to talk about today is I had a really great meal at Ninhao, which is a Fujianese restaurant in Brooklyn that's been on my list for a while. I actually went for a dinner that the chef Jesse Yuchen was doing with this group called Bubble Team that they have co-founded, which is dedicated to like marketing and also importing Taiwanese beer. So it was a banquet style meal that was doing both large format and smaller imported Taiwanese beer alongside kind of like banquet staples. So Lion's Head meatballs, which are those like perfect plump steamed pork meatballs, sticky rice steamed crab, garlic shrimp. Truly everything was so
yum,
good.
Yum.
And also the beer I really enjoyed. The beer was Ugly Half Beer, which is brewed in Taipei, in New Taipei City. It's a microbrewery, and they're doing toasted rice lager with awesome tea. And my favorite was a guava gosa with salted plum powder that comes in a little packet, which is a very common kind of like if you would eat guava on the street at a stall in Taiwan, then they would offer to put this plum powder on top of the fruit. So instead, it's almost like a Taiwanese michelada. You put a little bit of the salted plum powder in the glass, and then you pour in the guava beer with it.
Incredible pairing there.
I know. I thought it was really cool.
Wow.
And they are being sold like together. That's the way that the brewery is suggesting you drink this beer. So it's kind of like a co-branded thing. I really enjoyed the food and also the beer. And I believe that there's actually a variety of stores like Yunhai. Ninhao is selling this beer as well, where you can either, drink it in the restaurant or you can get it to go around the city.
I love that. Do they do NAs?
I don't think this brewery is doing NAs.
Not yet.
But
soon, maybe.
I guess we would probably have to go on the website.
Yeah, I'll check the website.
Yeah. Right. Do you have a last thing?
My last thing, Hudson Valley, get your pens out. Have you been to Tivoli?
I have been to Tivoli. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute for me too. I think I've been there a couple years ago. And so fresh eyes on Tivoli. I love that place. It's a cute little town. It's just north of Bard College and really close to the city. And I've always enjoyed that. They have a great art center that does performances outdoors all summer. There's a new sandwich shop, Club Sandwich, that I haven't been to yet that I need to go to.
Do they do club sandwiches?
They do. They do club sandwiches. And I think there's like some kind of BA connection. I don't know who owns it, but I recall on Instagram seeing some connection there. So there's like an editorial connection. They were only during the day. I rolled in around 5 p.m. They were closed, but I will visit them soon. I went and had a quick bite at Giobata Alimentari, which I think in the Hudson Valley, a really great Italian restaurant that does fresh pastas daily and has a side to the restaurant that is a market, and you can buy great sandwiches there. But I really, really want to talk about Fortune's Ice Cream. My first visit, which is like they've been around for like 9 years, kind of life-changing in a way. Really, really great creative ice cream using Hudson Valley dairy. We tried a Labana cherry double chocolate sundae that was just a perfect pairing suggested by the nice person working there. They do really great seasonal scoops like buttermilk peach sherbet, corn blueberry, and lavender shortbread. And they're really like thinking about flavor pairings in the coolest way. There's a lot of great ice cream in our world. And I just think Fortune's is near the top for me. And Tivoli is great if you're up there in the Hudson Valley this fall. Swing through town, have some pasta, have a scoop, go get that club sandwich. I just love that town.
Yeah, I love all of these ideas. I think Club Sandwich is kind of the perfect name for a sandwich
it's so
place.
Good.
And also, I have to say, I think two of the things you've mentioned today have involved ice cream sundaes, which I think is perfect.
Khushbu Shah got me thinking about it. We talked about it when we did our interview, and I'm just ordering I'm ordering sundaes. I'm on it.
I mean, do you think that ice cream has a season?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Ice cream is a year-round treat, and sometimes you just feel like ice cream. You don't need to be sweating to eat ice cream. That's crazy.
I was going to say, I actually don't. I think on principle, I would say it doesn't have a season, but I would say it would be pretty hard to find me in the middle of the snow, like in the winter, eating ice cream. So I do think it is important to be eating as much ice cream as we can before it gets too cold.
Agree. To support those guys. Yeah, totally agree. You should be eating it now in the summertime, but don't forget about it in February. I think I'll be back in February talking about sundaes again.
Okay, I'll hold you to it.
Thanks for sharing your 3 things.
You too.
Today's episode of This Is Taste is brought to you by Grow Therapy. If you're navigating anxiety, depression, relationship changes, or something else, you deserve care that meets you where you're at. Grow Therapy is designed to help you find a therapist who fits your needs and supports the way you want to feel. Grow makes it easier to find the right therapist for you. They connect you with thousands of independent, licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions. You can search by insurance, provider specialty, treatment methods, and more to find a therapist who is right for you. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/taste today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/taste. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an Enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Bettina Makalintal, welcome back to This Is Taste. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk with you. This is truly one of my favorite interviews of the year, or twice a year.
Oh, I'm so honored to be on it.
Well, I love your work, first off. And when we talk about Eater's Cookbook previews each season, you guys put in the work, which I really respect. You look at all the books, which Eliza and I do as well, and there are many. And you always come up with a list that it blends big names and big publishing houses. There's always some smaller houses in there. There's some books that I've never heard of, or at least was unfamiliar with, and this list includes that. And I so enjoy learning from these previews, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. It was fun to work on.
Before we get to the books, you're a senior reporter at Eater. You're on the scene. I have to ask, where have you been dining out in New York recently?
Okay, so my favorite place right now that I can't stop telling people about how much I love it is Bong, the new place in Crown Heights. And I've been twice, and I was just blown away by the menu both times because it's such a tiny restaurant. I think they have something like 20 seats inside. But the caliber of food that they're turning out is just so good. And everything's flavorful. If you want to go full seafood, you have amazing options. And if you want to go full land animals, everything is good too. They do the flavors are just so. I'm Filipino, so I'm that sort of Southeast Asian flavor profile is very familiar to me, but they have certain things where I was oh, this is close to what I know, but there's something in there that's really exciting. And I love a restaurant that sort of gets you to eat with your hands. And that really inspires it.
I mean, Bong is the opening of the summer, hands
Totally.
down. And Liza and I chatted about it on 3 Things recently. Haven't made it out myself. Amazing to see this restaurant and the size of it, and the small kitchen getting so much press, and hearing about it from the critics and the editors is terrific.
Yeah, I feel like I lucked into the reservations kind of early, and now the secret is out, and now it's impossible.
Do you hit the bat phone once in a while? Do you know anybody there?
No, never. I just randomly check Resi at really odd times of day.
You got to hit that Resi Notify, get on that list.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's talk books. Terrific season we have here. And we'll go over specific titles that you call out. We won't go over every title. I'm linking to the article in the show notes. Definitely read this if you're a fan of cookbooks, which many of you are. Give you a really great sense of what's happening this season. Bettina, I'm not going to call these trends because I hate that term. But did you see any patterns emerge when you were looking at the fall season?
I think the main thing that stands out is that, for one thing, this is like a really big season for a lot of those big cookbook names. So like we've got a new one from Samin, we've got Alison Roman, we've got Hetty McKinnon has a new book. But we also have some people who we haven't heard from in a little bit, but have also been really influential, who, like, for example, we have the new Joshua McFadden book on the list, 6 Seasons of Pasta. And like his 6 seasons, the vegetable-focused one was obviously really influential.
Yeah.
Like the kale sauce, like, basically changed my life.
Many others' lives were changed with that sauce and that book as well.
Yeah, and then I think the really, really big pattern is just this like real interest in sort of gathering, whether it's framed through these like this school of party cookbooks, which are very much focused on like specifically like the air quote entertaining and like these sort of big themed events where you are really like hosting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we also see this sort of like similarity in end goal, but very like ideologically different group of sort of like gathering cookbooks, which are, sort of like, Hetty McKinnon's book, for example, which we can talk about more later, is like very specifically, I think she says like she hates the word entertaining, right? And so we have these books that sort of get towards this like similar end goal of getting people together around food, but sort of have very different ethos around it. And so clearly people want to cook and eat with other people, I think is the real big thing happening
I think
now.
when these books were signed up 2-3 years ago, we were emerging from the pandemic, and publishing houses saw the need for more group gatherings, but more of a fine point approach and a diverse approach to entertaining. We'll get to those books. Happy to report we have interviews booked with Joshua, Allison, and Samin for future episodes of our show. So
awesome.
We'll have them all on to talk about their books. Last question before we get to individual titles. How do you and your colleagues at Eater, create the list? I mean, is there a process? I'm sure there is. And again, this is like a big project. I recognize the work that goes into it, and I'm a huge fan of it.
Yeah. So it basically starts with just like collecting a big spreadsheet of like every single release that's coming out, right? And then sort of I and, other editors at Eater are sort of going through all of these galleys and sort of figuring out like what speaks to us. And once we have the list, we sort of identify like what I'm personally interested in or other sort of cooking focused editors are interested in. And then we also sort of like extend this to the larger Eater team, because obviously like what makes Eater so special is that we have so many people who are distributed across the country and have so many different interests in food. And so we sort of see like what really speaks to other people on our team and like what feels important to them. So it's not just this sort of top-down thing of like what I'm interested in is what we cover.
Yeah.
We are really seeing like, oh, like this other person on our team is really into a book that I maybe didn't call to me as much. And then so from there, we're just like, we're just rating everything. We're like testing dishes and making sure we sort of like them until we come up with a list that feels like, it has a good balance of sort of those big names, but also releases that maybe you wouldn't think about as much or from like smaller publishers.
Yeah, it's I love the range of that. And let me ask you a question about balancing kind of the way cookbooks are presented. You're a great home cook. I've seen your videos. You're amazing. But I know not everyone on your team is really passionate about home cooking. How do you balance looking at the editorial elements of the book, the framing, the reporting with the actual recipe development? Because I think some publications look like hardcore at the recipes. Like the recipes have to be work, and that is all that we care about. But as we know, cookbooks are so much more than just a collection of recipes. That's why we love them so much. How do you think about that? It's not a tension, but that dichotomy.
Yeah, I think there are people out there who do really amazing sort of like in-depth cookbook reviewing. Like I love the Cult Flav people, if you're familiar. But,
totally.
I think for us, we're just very much also interested in like cookbooks that are interesting to read like a book.
Yeah.
Like, would someone enjoy this book even if they don't end up cooking recipes? Like, for example, one of the books on our list is the Korean Temple Cooking Cookbook. And there's like a recipe in there. I remember just looking through it and it says like, this tastes best after 3 years, right? And it's like most people are probably not going to wait 3 years to make this, but the book is really, really interesting aside from that. So I think we're trying to get a good balance in there of like books that people will just find like enjoyable to sort of flip through, even if they never cook anything from it.
We will get to that book. I have not seen the PDF or the advance yet. I cannot wait. Let's actually get to some titles. Hetty Lou McKinnon is one of our most trusted recipe developers, writes us a crazy recipe. I want to hear more about Linger.
Okay, so I think Hetty is, personally for me, like the one person that when I see she has a cookbook, I'm like, okay, I'm buying it, I'm seated, I'm cooking from this. So I think Linger is interesting because when I first heard the premise, which is sort of about like salads as a way to gather, I was like, interesting, because that felt, I feel like our conception of salads is so like functional food, right? Like they're not like most people are getting like a sweet green bowl and like eating it as fast as they can.
It's like health capital H or speed capital S. That's what you get salads for.
Yeah. So like salads have become this like sort of emblem of like optimized wellness culture, right? And so it feels so different to think about salads as something that are like thoughtful and connecting. And so Hetty's book is very much about the idea of like salads as being this sort of like flexible format. And I was also like, well, what does it mean to make something a salad? And so she sort of frames it as like probably the easiest way to say it is just like it's like vegetable dishes that have like lots of elements that are room temperature and you can sort of assemble ahead, or you can do most of the sort of prep ahead of time, so that it's like ultimately about the fact that like the salad is this like flexible format with vegetables that doesn't require a lot of sort of like fussing, so that you really can just like put something on the table and like enjoy a meal with people you want to spend time with,
And probably thinking outside, obviously leafy green is like the emoji for salads. It's like green salads are in play here, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it's just sort of like, and it really is sort of ultimately just like lots of vegetable dishes that all have like a crunchy component, something that you would call a dressing, So there's a lot of variety and there's a lot of stuff that you can make sort of throughout the seasons.
Really, really cool. I think in lesser hands, it could be a messy project to kind of have a less defined approach to the salad, but I have 100% confidence that Hetty nailed it as such a great author.
I think one thing about it, too, is that the essays in this are really strong also, and they're kind of unexpected. Like, she has an essay sort of using like lots of people write about winter tomatoes and, like, why you wouldn't want to eat one or, like, why why it's proof of why you should eat seasonally or whatever. But Hetty uses it as this way to sort of talk about like how essential it is for like women to create things, especially when they're sort of like misunderstood and things like that. And so I think that writing is really strong. But the thing that also blew my mind is that she cooked all of the dishes and shot them in real time while actually having gatherings with people.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wow, like, the fact that she's such a reliable and talented recipe developer, but is also like so good at cooking her own food and shooting it and styling it. I'm like, wow, I can only hope to be like you one day.
I love this book. Anna, previous host, and Eliza have interviewed Hetty, and I've never had the opportunity, so maybe I can make this happen.
She's also just so kind.
She's rad.
Yeah.
She's super cool. Next book is Family Tie by Arnold Mint and Kat Thompson. Eliza and I talked about it on our own preview, and it's a really great story, and it's not set in New York, LA, San Francisco. It has a different approach. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so one thing to shout out too with this book is the co-author Kat Thompson is an editor at Eater.
Oh, cool.
So so nice to have that like also tied in.
Kat Thompson, shout out, doing the double duty.
Yeah, exactly.
Editor and co-writer. I've done that myself. Not easy.
But so one thing that's interesting about this book is that Arnold's family ran a Thai restaurant in Nashville that I think opened in the 70s. And so some of the dishes in the book and what he writes about in the book are sort of this like challenge of introducing Thai food to people in Nashville who perhaps weren't familiar with it. And this was also a time when ingredients were less available. So I think it does a really interesting thing of sort of highlighting sort of that immigrant adaptation when they're sort of in a new place and trying to sort of bridge that gap with new diners. And so there's dishes in there, for example, that he says like one is sort of like a precursor to khao soi, but his mom called it like Indian noodles, I think, because I think it uses curry powder, if I'm correct. And so I think that's really interesting, the way that it sort of spotlights this sort of like this like precursor to like the huge boom in like modern Thai food that we have now.
Fascinating book. It's taking these recipes that we've in cookbooks for the past decade have really scrutinized the traditional origins, but it says taking these recipes and going back in time and looking at how immigrants to America thought about these classic recipes and calling it Indian noodles instead of khao soi by its name. Fascinating approach.
And so one thing I also find really interesting about this book is that he purposely chooses not to include recipes like pad thai or tom yum, and like writes that his goal, like that, that those dishes already have a lot of airtime, and so he wants to focus more on things that are like a little bit more overlooked. Like for example, there's a soup that it translates to bland soup.
Yeah.
And this is something that like I'd never heard of, and it's not something I see on menus, and so it's really interesting to see a book, put a spotlight on those things, and it's a book that also feels really accessible. For example, like there's a recipe in there for a chicken dish that he says that like he doesn't serve it at the restaurant because so many of the ingredients are canned and processed. But the upside to that is that it makes it really accessible for a home cook, especially someone who doesn't have a big sort of pantry of Thai staples. Like you can pretty easily get those things. And so I like the way it sort of threads that line between like overlooked things, but also like trying to make things approachable for people.
And it's done with like ultimate authenticity. These are the recipes that his family, created and he grew up eating. So it's not just trying to do quick hacks. It actually has a history to it. And having Kat Thompson on the project, having a journalist as the collaborator and really having that eye for story, terrific mix there.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Next book we have to talk about is definitely the season's biggest book. It's a new one from Samin Nosrat. It's been several years since the debut of Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat and Samin's rise in food media and just really international acclaim with her Netflix series and just being awesome, frankly. And I think it's very anticipated. Eliza and I have chatted about it as well. We're going to have Samin on the show. What is your take on this book?
Yeah, I think that Good Things, Samin's new book, really sort of it's such proof of why everyone loves Samin so much. I think one thing she's really good at in both like her writing and sort of her like public persona is like really threading this needle between like food as joyful, but also sort of like experiencing the harder parts of life and how that sort of affects your food. She writes in the book about sort of experiencing loss and depression and sort of coming out of a hard time sort of post-pandemic. And so this book is really, I think that if Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat feels very like technical, Good Things almost feels kind of like spiritual. Like the whole this sort of whole through line is like it's like these good little things that you have in your like pantry or your kitchen, or like good ways to gather with people. And I think this is just like it's a very earnest book that feels very it also feels very sort of real to how people cook. Where I think Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat is such a reliable like tome, right?
Yeah.
But you're maybe not pulling it out all the time when you like just want sometimes you just like do want someone to tell you what to do in the kitchen. And so Good Things, I think like it provides more of that. Like it understands that the reality of cooking for people is that sometimes they do actually just want to be told like, here's how you make this dish.
Yeah.
But it's also just written in Samin is a really good writer, and Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, obviously goes a lot into her sort of like her like history with cooking, but this book feels like very personal, and it's also very literary. Like she references like Audre Lorde and like Robin Wall Kimmerer, and so and like Annie Dillard, and it's just like it's also just like a pleasure to read, and it feels very joyful and very like it is sort of like Hetty's book where it makes you want to cook with people.
Well, Samin has always had the literary chops. I think Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, if you're reading it as a work, is just such a pleasure read as well, full of stories and of course the technical know-how, and that kind of launched her into the world. But she's a terrific writer, and you've called it out well with her literary references. Let's move on to the new book from Alison Roman. I've had this book for a long time. We publish Alison, so I've been along the journey here at Clarkson Potter. I've always been a fan of Alison's books. This is her fourth. And I think you can put the first three into a grouping of Alison Roman books. And now we've got a new era for Alison. I think the art program is incredible. I think they just absolutely nailed it. It looks very different from her first three books. And I think she's hinted on social media and in her terrific newsletter that, this may be her quote unquote adult book or something, a bit of a maturation process for her. And the last thing about Alison is I just think she's a terrific writer. She can write her pants off. I think if you subscribe to her newsletter, you just know that she actually thinks about and considers the head notes and considers the framing of these recipes. And there's amazing essays as well. I'm sorry, I just gave my preview. You're here to preview it, but I want to get your take too, because I think I'm very biased with Alison. She's a friend, and we publish her, as I mentioned. But Eater has called out this book as one of the season's best.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we think about people who have been influential in sort of home cooking as at large in the United States over the past decade or 5 years, like she's probably the top name, right? I think there's recipes in this book that some of the recipes, I think the idea for them, if not the exact recipe, it seemed to have appeared first, like in her newsletter. And so, or a while ago. And so I didn't realize sort of until going through this book that I had already sort of worked them into my cooking routine.
Yeah.
For example, like her take on sort of eggplant parm, where instead of breading and frying the eggplant, you are like roasting it and then putting breadcrumbs in between the layers. So you get the same vibe, but not the work. And I think that's what she really excels at, is just this like ability to like sort of, I think that's what every recipe developer wants to do, is sort of like make you feel like you came up with it. And it's just so ingrained in your life that you make it all the time without really thinking like, oh yeah, I got it from this book. And so I think this book is just full of dishes like that, where I'm like, okay, this is very simple. It's very much like things that I don't have to run out to the store to get. I've realized because of Alison Roman, I stock my pantry already full of like anchovies, tomatoes, parm. And so I just find it like a very, very like cookable book. And there's like, because it so heavily emphasizes sort of pantry cooking, it feels really useful throughout the whole year.
Oh, yeah.
Where I think that like Alison's previous books, I feel like feel a little bit more sort of reliant on like nice produce or like sort of having something that's perfect in the moment. And this book is much more about like, okay, you don't, it's like January and you don't have anything exciting, but like here's a recipe to make cabbage really good. And it's, really relies on these things that are like very easy to find. They're not expensive. And I do think that especially sort of like with the state of the economy, I think that is sort of what home cooks are looking for right now. They're not trying to find like they're not trying to like run out and find a really expensive tomato, but they will have tomatoes on the shelf.
Or canned tomatoes.
Yeah.
And I'll say two other things. I think the pasta section is like impressive.
She makes a good pasta.
She makes a great pasta. She really focused on it. I think she could have written a straight pasta book, and maybe that's in her future as well. It's a very healthy section, and it's not just the scallion pastas that we know. There's a bunch of new ones in there as well. And she's a real Italy lover. It's clear. The other thing is to be clear, there aren't any dessert recipes in this book because her previous book had covered desserts really thoroughly, and she didn't feel the need to like shoehorn in a few desserts at the end. I thought that was a smart choice.
Yeah, I'm like a very solidly savory person who never makes dessert at home. And so that really spoke to me because I feel like, I like that the book really sort of maximizes like I'm going to cook through most of it, because it is like savory. There's not going to be this whole section that I kind of just like ignore.
That you gloss over.
And so I appreciate that.
There's not like a cocktails section either. I mean, it's just a really smart book editorially. It's really, really focused. And I think if you own one or all of Alison's books, do not sleep on this one because it's very different. So let me ask you, when you're a savory person, I mean, when you're at home cooking, what is for dessert if you're not baking for you?
Oh, I just don't do dessert.
You just don't do it?
I want more savory.
Oh,
yeah, if anything, I'm like, okay, like I want a bag of chips. But yeah, like I've had like one bag of gummies on my shelf for like 2 months and I haven't finished them because I really like desire it that infrequently.
Well, if you've listened to a previous episode with Khushbu Shah, you know that gummies are better when aged. So you're aging your gummies. So
that's true.
That's perfect.
These are the Jolly Rancher ones, and I feel that they don't age in the same way as a gummy bear.
Hey, it's Paris. I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Let's get back to the titles. This is a big season for entertaining books, as mentioned at the top, and you call out three of them in the preview: Party People by Brie Larson and Courtney McBroom, Let's Party by Dan Pelosi, and Having People Over by Chelsea Fagan. This category also includes Jake Cohen's Dinner Party Animal, which I really like. So there's really just boom of party books. How did you pick these three?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it felt very essential to have party books on the list because it does feel like the theme is everyone wants to party. I think Dan Pelosi just brings such a sort of like such joy to cooking and to the kitchen. And I think his book really sort of like brings that forth. I just am always envious when I'm looking at his Instagram of like the types of parties that he has.
Yeah.
And so it felt very natural for him to do a book on that. And this book does feel very sort of comprehensive. And I like the recipes and I like the sort of vibe that he creates. And so the Brie Larson and Courtney McBroom book is it's very maximalist partying. I think the one thing that this like sort of moment in books is really making clear is that we're not in the Alison Roman like having people over moment anymore. This is like themed. This is like activities.
Yeah.
There's a recipe in the Brie Larson and Courtney McBroom book for like dueling roast chickens, right? For like a party. And
if you have 2 ovens and you're Brie Larson, and I'm sure she has 3.
And you have like a lot of friends.
Yeah, a lot of friends. You can do that. Maybe not for every home cook.
Yeah, and so I think that really was interesting just because it is so sort of like over the top and fun. It really does feel celebratory. And then having people over, the Chelsea Fagan book is sort of this like, I feel like if Samin's book and Hetty's book exist on like the gathering end and then party people and let's party are on this other end, I feel like having people over is sort of in the center where it is like, it is about like the importance of having a dinner party. And she is very interested in sort of like hosting and being a good host. But it doesn't feel quite as like over the top as like, having activity set and like, decor that matches the theme. And I think that book is also, having people over is also interesting because it has some sort of like essays that are like meant to make you think a little bit. Like there's one about sort of curation versus consumerism and this sort of tendency for people to, I think it is very true that dinner parties, as much as they are about gathering, have also become this big moment on social media to sort of just like, to sort of perform, and to like sort of get attention through the like perfect tomato themed ceramics that you bought, right?
Yeah.
And so I find it interesting to see a book that tries to sort of resist that sort of social media fueled tendency.
And I think Chelsea is a journalist through and through, so it's a little different framing than a recipe developer, and so there's a little more cultural study there.
Yeah, and there's also a chapter, for example, about sort of like cultivating grown-up communities and sort of like how to sort of like how to do hosting in a way that feels good for you. And so I think that book is really interesting and sort of like the ideology of it.
Well, it speaks volumes that Brie Larson's book is on here because, actor books, mileage may vary with books by actors who maybe aren't in the food world. But clearly with Courtney McBroom writing Shotgun, this book has real editorial chops.
Yeah, this book, it's very packed. Like it has, I feel like sometimes those can feel a little bit flimsy. This one feels very packed with like not only recipes, but sort of like ideas for like how to have the party and sort of like visual inspiration. And so it does feel really useful if you are someone who wants to sort of have big themed gatherings, especially.
You mentioned Korean temple cooking earlier in this conversation, and I haven't had a chance to check this out, as I mentioned. I am very curious. This is a topic that I hold near and dear, and I think in my work with Koreatown and Korea World, we dipped into Korean temple cuisine in chapters, but not in book form. And this is the book that I've heard many have wanted to write, and finally it's arrived. Tell me about it.
I think this book is very interesting right now because like I obviously don't have to tell you that like Korean food is really booming right now, right? But I feel like this is a very different side of Korean food than what we sort of tend to see in this sort of like this book is sort of like not very flashy. It's like kind of quiet and slow. It's very much about sort of like the philosophy and like the process of cooking and like making these foods. And it's just like the photos are so beautiful. This is one that, like I said, like even if the recipes are not totally approachable to you in terms of like timing or ingredients, it's totally worth reading, and it's just like a beautiful sort of coffee table moment as well. It feels like it really captures, the process of certain dishes being made. It feels very evocative of the atmosphere of what it might be like to be there.
And this is from Honam Seelman, and I would hope that it would be a little bit more of a quiet approach to this style of cooking. And honestly, the photography is everything with this type of book. I think you really need to see the way that temple cuisine is presented, because to me, and in visiting, I've had the pleasure of visiting several temples in Korea and in the States. It's some of the most thoughtful and well-presented food I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think also I think even it's also very inspiring to just in the sense of sort of like figuring out how to sort of plate food. Like it's very sort of well thought out and taken care of. And so I really appreciate that sort of inspiration.
Well, we have a couple more, and please definitely check out the full preview. Link is in the show notes. When Michael W. Twitty writes about recipes from the American South, what is he writing about?
I think he's really, so he is like trained as a historian. He's done so much research. What he's really writing about sort of like lineages and sort of different influences in the American South sort of intersect. And I think this is a book that's really, it reads like you're reading like sort of a historical textbook. I think one thing I find very interesting about the headnotes is that they're very focused on sort of like the people or the cookbooks that sort of like gave rise to a dish, right? And so I think that feels very different from just like reading. It's not a cookbook that sort of like purely sees itself as like functional, and like copying the recipe. It's a book that's very much about like, this is where it came from, and these are sort of like the things that made it possible.
So this is a real historical view of Southern cooking. So it travels through time in the pages?
Yes, definitely. And it also sort of goes through the sort of like debates that people have around Southern food, for example, there is, he goes into like this dish called Brunswick stew, and and the headnote is all about like how much sort of debate there is over whether it's Carolinian or Virginian or Georgian, and so it's really sort of like this like it's a very like comprehensive and foundational sort of like understanding of Southern cooking.
Yeah, I can't wait to read that. I know we're having Michael on the show later this fall to talk about it, and we'll hear more about it. The next book we're going to talk about is one I really love. It's called Steakhouse by Eric Wareheim and Gabe Ula. And it's a book that I've had really early. We published it here, so full disclosure there. And I think it is such a smart book. It really covers the American steakhouse and all of its incredible permutations and some history. It has a lot of personality. And I was happy you called it out. What drove you to that one?
So I think one thing that's really interesting to me about this book is that the steakhouse feels so sort of like at odds with the idea of cooking at home, right? Because the whole point of the steakhouse and the appeal of it is that you are like transported into this place where you almost feel like a different person, and it feels like such a sort of break from real life. And so like as much as this book does have the recipes, which like I will say I'm not very good at making steak. I appreciate any tips to making a better one. As much as this book does have some recipes, it is very much like an homage and sort of like a love letter to all of the major steakhouses around the country. And it really spotlights sort of like the veteran servers, the hosts. Like there's all these pictures of sort of the people that make these like steakhouses into these sort of like mythic places that we love. And so I really appreciate the sort of breadth in which that it covers the steakhouse.
I'm so glad you wrote about this book. We love steakhouses. I think we're obsessed with places like Houston's and Keen's, and we think about steakhouses a lot. But like many of these smaller steakhouses in communities outside of the coastal cities and maybe Chicago don't get coverage. And this book does that. They even go to Mexico too, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it just feels like a book that was done with so much passion and care. And it feels like they really took the time to sort of like dive into why these places are so important. And it's a book that really like, does it make me want to cook a steak at home? If anything, no. It sort of like proves that I'm not good at that. But it does really, really make me want to go to a steakhouse. And I think it really like does a really good job of sort of like showing the allure of these places,
Well, that's it for our books that we're going to talk about on the show. And I think there's many more, so definitely check that link. But Bettina, I have to ask you, in looking at the big fall season and thinking about titles, are there any topics or categories or styles of cooking that you wish were represented more in this season?
I think this was a pretty exciting season in terms of just like the sheer breadth of books that we saw. I think one thing I am personally very excited to see more of is like sort of narrative cookbooks and cookbooks that like push the form of the cookbook, as opposed to just like essays and the headnotes mostly. And so, for example, like one thing I'm very excited about is obviously friend of the pod, Tanya Bush's Will This Make Me Happy?
Yeah.
And so, I'm just like curious to see, people sort of question what a cookbook is, and it would be interesting. I would love to see sort of like mainstream publishers put a little bit of more support behind that, because I feel like I see these a lot from like little indie projects, right?
Yeah.
But I think Tanya's book is a very promising sign.
I agree. Tanya's book is much anticipated here on the show. I think it's a great point. I want to tap into that briefly. I think with Substack and this really robust food and drink column that you can go directly to at the Substack homepage, you're seeing this. You're seeing these voices appear who are writing about recipes, but with very long essays or headnotes around these recipes and with real point of view. And if you follow along, there's narrative arcs happening in some of these Substacks if you're following along for months and months. And I know all the editors here in the building are reading Substack. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. There should be more of these books that are kind of a blend of cookbook and narrative, but like let's push it forward. And I know Tanya her book covers this. I've not read it, but I'm sure it does. Is like let's actually have a narrative arc in a cookbook,
or even in food memoir. I feel like food memoir is so often like, here is the essay and then here's the recipe at the end of it, right? They feel like somewhat disjointed pieces.
Yeah.
And so one book that, one of my favorite books that I think really pushes this is Rebecca Mae Johnson's Small Fires,
mm-hmm.
which really sort of like, I think the language she uses that she like wanted to like blow up the kitchen and like deconstruct it, right? Yeah. And so everything is very sort of like, it's very sort of interspersed and woven together, like the experience of cooking a recipe, as opposed to just like telling you about it and then giving you the recipe. So I think, it's like obviously not the most like functional, i.e. I'm like not reading that book to like make a red sauce.
Yeah.
But I do think it makes you think about the act of cooking very differently.
If any editors are listening, and I know many are, those Roads and Kingdoms books by Matt Golding from years ago, those books, like that's a travelogue, so it's not necessarily a cookbook, but it's certainly food is at the center. I could see that happening too, where more like narrative travelogue cookbooks can appear, where it's actually like a journey that we're following along.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I think it would be very cool. Great points there.
Thanks.
Bettina Makalintal, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you for having me.
This is Taste is hosted and produced by Eliza Barbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumbert and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.